Hi, everybody. It's Bob Ost, and it's Friday. It's May, it's May 2nd or May 9th. I get so confused. It's May 9th, isn't it? It is May 9th, right? And here we are with the Resources Unlimited weekly community gathering. We've been doing these. This is, I think, 263rd consecutive one that we've done since April 17th, 2020. Started this as a community service because of COVID and shutdown, and people just needed a place to go and feel like they were part of a community. So I had this crazy idea that I didn't have the idea. Somebody told me to do it. So I'm not going to take credit for it because I didn't know what Zoom was. But I was told to open up a Zoom room and do these things. And we've been doing it now for 5 years. Um, so true for those of you who don't know us. And I'm thinking that some of you are randomly finding us out there on YouTube. We're an arts service organization based in New York. And for 33 or 34 years, we've been basically helping theater artists understand the business of theater. And we've had a specific interest in helping producers. So that's who we are. And we've been having conversations about theater and the arts. And we we try to talk about just about anything that I can figure out to talk about, find people to talk about. And we've been doing this for so long. Now that we're back to normal, back in a normal world. Well, in terms of COVID, it's a normal world. I don't think anything else about the world is normal these days. That may just be me. So we're now no longer focusing on the aspects of survival in a shutdown. We're really just talking about theater and theater programs and different aspects of the arts. Um, Today, I'm talking about my one of my favorite things, musicals. I myself, for those of you who don't know it, I write musicals. I write for musical theater. That's one of the things I've done through my whole career. I I'm much better known for doing this Theater Resources Unlimited gig than I am for my musicals and my plays. But I still love musical theater and hold it in reverence, actually. We do a workshop about the dramaturgical structure of musicals called How to Write a Musical That Works. That's what we call it. And today I have a guest whose company I wasn't aware of, and I'm going to ask him a little bit more about that. I just sort of learned about him recently. His name is James Rodgers, and his company is called Manhattan Musical Theater Lab. And I'm going to actually bring him on now. And James, I'm going to ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself and your background. I know that you're from New Zealand. Take it from there.
Hi, Bob. How are you? Nice to be here. Yeah, I am from New Zealand originally. I came to the United States in way back in 2005, even though I don't sound like I've been here for a long time because my wife makes sure I keep my foreign accent. Um, and I came actually to study at the Manhattan School of Music as an opera singer. So I'd done my undergraduate work in New Zealand for 4 years. I did some additional study there too to prepare to come to the US and came here to study in a master's program at the Manhattan School of Music. And it was an interesting sort of realization for me because my career or my aspiration as a performer did a bit of a U-turn. I had started in high school, as so many of us do, falling in love with singing because of musical theatre. And, you know, the sort of British invasion was very much in New Zealand as well at the time, and Les Mis. And, I used to sing Les Mis every day, like everybody else that loved musical theatre in those days. And then I had a conversation with a very great mentor of mine, a guy named Con O'Brien, who was my teacher at the high school. And he said, look, you should go study singing properly first so that you can learn how to sing well, and then you'll be well equipped to go and audition overseas. And at that time, of course, the plan was to go to the West End and try my hand at that. And so the thing that sort of threw that all in the loop was I went to my first year of university to study voice, and my teacher was an opera singer who'd sung at some pretty prestigious places, including Glyndebourne Theatre Festival. And she got me tickets to see an opera called Simon Boccanegra at the National New Zealand Opera Festival by Verdi. And I heard this, and I think that the sheer capacity of the vocal output was the first thing that I just couldn't quite believe, that these human beings could create this huge sound and fill this 2,000 seat theatre, cut across an orchestra. And so I became a bit obsessed with opera for that period of time, really obsessed. Like I would go to the city library where they had this massive recording collection of CDs, and I would check out 5 operas every week for my first year at university. And that's a lot. Like these are 3 hours each. So it's a lot of opera listening every week.
That's
But
commitment. That is commitment. I
pretty
acknowledge
crazy.
you for that.
But I just got sort of obsessed with the human voice, and I'd never heard the human voice produced this way as a singing. I'd always loved singing, and I'd listened to a lot of jazz and a lot of different styles of singing, but I'd never really listened to this. And so that obsession in the voice really led me to love the art form, and I sort of went all in on opera. And frankly, looking back now, I sort of became a bit of a snob about musical theatre. I sort of became one of these people who sort of thought opera was a higher art form and, ridiculous really, but in hindsight, but, youth is wonderful. And so I pursued that, and I sort of thought to myself, well, I'll go and see how I do at it. And if I continue to progress, then I'll keep going. And I did. And so got myself a place in the program at the Manhattan School of Music. But then what happened was I met a woman named Carolyn Marlowe at the Manhattan School of Music who ran a musical theatre program. And she was recommended to me by my teacher, Neil Rosenshine. And essentially, I discovered American musical theatre in a way that I'd never really known about it. And so
I'm coming on with a yay, yay American theater.
exactly,
Okay.
And so people, Stephen Schwartz, I knew Stephen Schwartz, but I didn't know Stephen Schwartz. I didn't understand the full scope and the complexity of the work that Stephen Schwartz was doing. Stephen Sondheim, coming further forward, Adam Guettel, and all into the modern contemporary musical theatre that was happening in the early 2000s, pieces like Next to Normal. And I suddenly realized, wow, there's nothing to be a snob about. I mean, this is an incredible.
You talk about volume of sound from an opera singer. Did you ever hear Alice Ripley sing Next to Normal? That's a
I did.
volume of sound.
Yeah, for sure. The recording. Unfortunately, I didn't
She's
see.
a friend of mine, by the way. But
Oh, really?
we actually talked about it. She doesn't even know how she survived that show
Wow. Yeah, that
vocally.
I understand. Yeah, I saw the second cast, which was obviously incredibly powerful, also. Um, but yeah, and so that really sort of led me back into the world of musical theatre as a lover and as someone who decided that it was something that I wanted to have as part of my performing
No, I
life.
have one question about something you said earlier. Did you say your wife encourages you to keep your New Zealand accent or not keep it? Because
I'll keep it.
you've
Absolutely.
been very successful at that.
Absolutely. It's the main reason she fell in love with me, I think, Bob, to be
Ah,
honest.
got it, got it. So so
Um,
let's fast forward a little, not much though. Your your interest in musical theater at this point in your conversation about it is really about the performance aspect of it. Um, at what point did you decide that we needed Manhattan Musical Theater Lab? And tell us a little bit about what your concept is behind that.
yeah. So Manhattan Musical Theatre Lab came out of a conversation with Gwen Armand, who some people
I know Gwen. She's a former TRU member.
right, yeah. I
Hell's
think
Kitchen
that,
musicals.
yeah, right. So Gwen at the time was on the board of something called, well, it was called Manhattan Musical Theatre Lab, but it had been called Musical Mondays.
Oh
And so
yeah.
Musical Mondays was started in 99, in
My pal
1999.
Frank Evans.
It's Frank Evans, right? And Bit
Yeah.
Goss was the original founder. And so Gwen was on the
Vic
board.
Goth, and you're just you have no idea what you're doing to me, doing to my heart. Vic Goss and Frank Evans were both dear friends, and uh, they both left way too early, way too soon.
Yeah, yeah. I think that I had a feeling, Bob, to be honest, before we got on this call, I thought that would be the case. But so Frank, but essentially what happened is that the organization had sort of stalled after Frank passed away, and they did some really good work for a period of time, but the board went through some changes and they essentially couldn't find a path forward. So at that time, I was the managing director of a small theatre called the Mac Hayden Theatre up in Chatham, New York. And I was having a conversation with Gwen about our interest to get into the development and support of new musical theatre. And she said to me, well, let me have a think about this because would you be interested in taking the reins of this organization that we are considering winding down? It has a very small amount of money in the bank, but there's some money there. And so subsequently, there were a lot of conversations. I met with the existing board. I said, yes, I definitely would be interested in doing this. But one of the things I wanted to do was to really rebuild. And the board members there that were there were really not interested in carrying on. And I said to them, look, I would
Well,
like to start fresh. Let's
well,
totally.
let me just jump in and say that Musical Mondays and the organization itself really just was an opportunity for people to get a first look at their shows. What you do according to your mission now is a little bit more complicated.
Hmm.
So you find your way there. You go at your own pace, but I just wanted to
Yeah,
comment
it's
on
a,
that.
that's a really interesting point, and there's some interesting history there too, I think, Bob, that essentially what I got opportunity to have was all the resources that the organization had. Obviously, they basically passed everything to me. Then it's 2020, and we all know what happened in 2020. So there was no way we were going to be producing anything for a period of time. So what I did with a colleague of mine, Amanda Calvin, is we looked at the landscape, we looked at what it had been, and we started trying to find something that did not exist and an opportunity that would be provided that was totally out there compared to the opportunities that already existed. So we did a lot of research on that. In that,
Oh, can I insert something? A fun fact. I just real and you know this, but you probably didn't think to say it. Musical Mondays, the original Musical Mondays, is where Next to Normal started.
that's right. Yeah.
So it was called Body Electric at that
Yeah,
point.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So what was great was that and several other things, like I was looking through some documentation just the other day, and actually like Julie Benko's name popped up as one of the performers back in the early 2013, I think. So it's had a lot of interesting and pretty heavy hitter people go through there. Um, but what was interesting, I found this original document that BIC had created, and what BIC had created was this three-phase model that was their ambition. The ambition was to do what you're talking about, they became known for, which was the first phase where they would give a reading and there'd be a public showing. And what we see quite often, in the city is going on pretty regularly, these small scale readings that are not too expensive. And then what their plan was that over the course of 3 years, they would progress the work through if it had value. So it would go through to a year two, where it had a sort of semi-stage production. And then it would go through to a year three, which they would have a part in producing it with a presenter. That was the plan that BitGoss had drawn up with the original team about what they wanted to do. They never really got past the first step of that. But what that did for us was it gave us a framework to think about how we might more robustly support the creation of a new work that is given the kind of support that a producer who's producing, at a very high level, like a Ken Davenport or somebody like that who's wanting to take a show to Broadway, the kind of investment that they would make in a show. But a piece that doesn't have a producer, attached at that level, that doesn't have that kind of financing behind it on its own, and is really artist driven. So what we developed then was essentially a 2 week showcase production model that's very much based on what the union already has in place, but that is very focused initially on the artists and what they need. So, for example, what we discovered in our research about the type of presentations that were happening was that there was a lot of programs where there was expectation of public performance. So there'd be development of, say, 10 musicals happening simultaneously, and after the 2 week period of development, which was intense and very useful for everybody, there would be a public presentation, a very public presentation of that, and then it would be, beneficial to that extent, whatever it was, that was sort of the end of it. What we wanted to do was we wanted to do two main things. We wanted to provide more time up front for just development process. We wanted to provide more resources and administrative infrastructure. And we also wanted to take away the performance anxiety pressure that occurs with a lot of that type of program, because we feel like as soon as you add the ego of actors, and I don't say that in a negative way, because most actors' ego is what makes them good at acting, because they care about the material and they care about what they're presenting. But as soon as you add that type of pressure around the project, it suddenly shifts focus away from what's actually important for the piece into what's important for the practitioners that are presenting. And so what we wanted to try to do was build a model that's very bespoke, that's bespoke for the particular work and for the phase at which the piece is at. And then our administrative or artistic influence on the piece is not to do with the piece itself, but to do with how we can present it for prospective producers or artistic directors in a way that is going to showcase it as best we can in the short time frame that we have with the materials that we've worked on. So by the end of 2 weeks, we're not going to be able to present the entire musical. That's just, we don't think is realistic. And so what we want to do for our first week is focus as an organization on seeing what the team is putting together, that the team being the director and the music director and the writers, obviously, and then evaluate by the end of that first week, okay, we think this is what we should present. We think this is what you've got looking really good, and we think this tells enough of the story to be getting the hook in to a person who might be interested in becoming involved for a longer term relationship with the piece.
No, well, let me jump in. I want to ask a couple questions. I want to fill in a few blanks. So you mentioned 2020, and we know what happened then, and we knew that nothing was happening with the company for a while. When did you get to the point where you were able to actually start programming?
Well, this is it. You're at it. You are at it. So we are just launching this year.
Oh, okay, got it. Okay.
Yeah, that's what's it. So this is essentially what we're doing is on ramping over the next 3 years, Bob. And so you are in at the absolute beginning, which is why it's an exciting phase for us, because in October we do this for the first time, and we are building, as you can tell, I think from our timeline, we're really determined that we get this as right as you possibly can first time around, knowing that we're going to learn a heck of a lot during the next few months and years, because again, going back to that original sort of idea that what I've seen, and we've all seen this in your organization is supporting people constantly trying to help through this problem, is that writers, there's a massive amount of pressure when you have to self-present and put all of that admin work in and put all of that infrastructure around you to try to get your work in front of the people that might be able to take it to the next level.
And you actually heard examples in the room today of like Joel and his show Ocean in a Teacup, and how he's offering opportunities. We fully believe and support the idea of self-producing. We also, I think one of the reasons why there's a kindred spirit here with you and TRU is that you have an equal understanding and equal interest in developing both the art and also the business side of the art. So you're trying to offer what your intention is, let's not say trying. Your intention is to create an opportunity for people to develop the new work artistically, and also you want to develop the people, the business people, the producers, I guess. You actually refer to them as artistic directors in your mission. Um,
Mm. Interesting.
so
Yeah.
let's talk about that distinction for a second. You talk about artistic directors, and you talk about the fact that you've created two different initiatives, support programs. One is the New Works Initiative for the writers, and the other is an artistic director fellowship to help the future, the leaders of the industry, the people that are going to make these shows happen, or help make these shows happen. Sometimes it's not single-handed. Um, you just blurred on your
Oh,
you just blurred. I don't know what happened.
what's happened there?
There we go. Now you're back.
The AI didn't like the look of me, obviously.
Well, shame on AI. How dare they be that judgmental? Um, so so let's talk about why you chose the term artistic directors. Um, for me, artistic director usually means somebody who's the head of a not-for-profit theater company, and kind of taking care of the artistic decision making in a larger organization,
Hmm.
like Manhattan Theater Club or Lincoln Center, or
Right.
even smaller companies.
Yeah.
Um, so do you mean artistic director, or do you mean producer?
No, I mean artistic director. It's a very intentional choice that. So a second part of our research and understanding and conversations with people in the business, and really in this, and now we're talking about the non-profit portion of the business, which obviously we are a part of, um, is that no one really knows how you become an artistic director. It sort of is, you might get a job directing at a theater, or you become a very famous director, and therefore go into a role in a larger organization. But there's not really a clear pathway. It sort of seems to happen in all sorts of roundabout ways, which is fine. But what we feel is that there is a lot of people who get in this role and don't really have the understanding of the business components of running a non-profit. And they don't know how to talk to their to their management teams in such a way that is immediately helpful. And that causes some problems for organizations. And all of us have heard stories of organizations that have fallen off the rails on the basis of, this type of issue of just not understanding what the business and, non-profit and compliance elements are to being the leader of a non-profit. So what we saw was an opportunity that was actually in some ways beneficial for us in its conception, and I'll talk about that in a second. But what we wanted to do was provide a mentored opportunity for somebody to curate a small non-profit situation with a lot of support, and to get an insight into what that looks like, and some experience in board relations, in working with a managing director or a general director, working with donors, being the artistic leader of the organization, but not having their hands all over the actual show itself. And that's sometimes, especially in small organizations, that's a hard line for people to carry, because they are very much the driving force artistically of the organization. So all of those elements that are a big challenge in the artistic director role, we wanted to provide a chance for somebody to try that out. And when I say somebody, I don't mean necessarily like a young person straight out of school. I'm talking about anybody who has ambition to be an artistic director at any stage of their career, coming in and getting a sort of mentored opportunity to do that in an environment where it's not a $5 million budget and a huge financial risk, and it's not full-scale productions, which is obviously adding a whole layer of complexity to it, that when all of that hits at once, it's a lot for people, we felt like. So So this is an opportunity that sort of grew out of our question mark, and this is something that you have asked me about previously, is how do you find the work? Because you noted on our website that we say we don't take submissions. And we don't take script submissions because, to be honest, at the stage we're at, it's just not realistic for us to read enough scripts to really get to give people a fair opportunity. So if we did that, most of the feedback we got is you'll get submissions, you'll get hundreds of them. And who do we choose? How do we choose which ones to read? And there was a lot of complexity in that decision making. So what we came up with was this idea that our application process for our artistic director fellowship, obviously for this organization, we're going to be looking for someone who's very plugged into the new works that are going on at the moment, into the new work scene, to the writing teams that exist, to the type of work that's happening. So our application process is going to be, when we do launch this in the next year, that they pitch us on a season of 3 new works in development that they know about, that they think have value. And that might be 3 specific works or 3 specific writing teams. But the pitch gives us an exposure that goes beyond our own resources at the moment, which is primarily our board's outreach and my own outreach into the community, learning inside organizations like you. But we feel like, for example, if we had 10 applicants, we just learned about 30 new pieces that we didn't know that existed. And so our hope is that in that presentation process, we'll see the creativity of the potential artistic director, their curation capability, which when you're talking about leading a nonprofit artistically, the idea of curation is really critical and becoming more critical, I think, as the musical theatre space moves more and more into the tradition that we might have expected from an opera company more traditionally, where there's a lot more thematic programming happening. So we're very interested in that type of creative vision. And also we're just going to see in that presentation how they present themselves, what their creative juices bring out in the process. So it
How
was
are
sort
you
of
how are you finding these people? And
well,
do you want some help?
essentially, what we haven't yet taken submissions for this, Bob, because what we're doing, we're taking our time. I mean, what we're talking about, there's a reason why our scale of financial of support for a new work hasn't happened by another organization, except large organizations like I don't know, Paper Mill Playhouse does some of it. There's obviously all the big guns in town, like the Roundabout, they all do it. But there's no organization doing this on its own because it costs a lot of money. I mean, this is going to be $40,000 workshop. This is what we're providing in our new works
And
development.
three of them times 3.
And ultimately, we're hoping to do 3 of them annually. So what we're doing is we're taking our time to get to that. So we're essentially on ramping over the next 3 years. Our hope is that this year we start with our first, we build some momentum, and next year we'll have 3 what we call phase 1s. And then we'll have 1 work which goes into what we call phase 2. Phase 2 is a much larger 5-week developmental workshop that really flexes the full muscle of the equity showcase code, our workshop code. And so we will hopefully what we get to by year 3 is 3 phase 1s and 1 of those phase 2s. So by that time, we're talking about, $250,000 that we have to annually come up with. And so we're just trying to be very, very careful about expectations at this stage and take our time before we get to that type of a need of raising. And so obviously it's an exponential growth in some ways in 3 years, but we think that the need is such, and everybody we talk to, the likes of yourself, they see the value here because it gives an opportunity for profile of a piece that most commercial producers and regional theatres wouldn't take the risk on at that early stage. We're trying to get that early stage to happen more quickly for the creators, because as you've been talking about today with your members, this stuff can take them years and years and years and decades before they can finally find the time to actually get the exposure that they need to find a producer that's really going to take them through the next level. So in a way, what we're trying to provide is as much of an opportunity as we can for some creative teams and some writing teams to make that process happen a little faster. And so it's a big, big ambitious goal. What we're hoping also will occur during this is that we'll become very, very good at running workshops and supporting writers and giving them guidance on how the workshop can go and what things they should focus on for where the work is at the time. And in a way, become an expert organization at guiding that process. And so we hope that if we gain a reputation in that, the support will come from the industry because, ultimately, if a commercial producer, even at that level, can see a workshop that they didn't have to produce that has 40,000 or $100,000 behind it of somebody else's money, that's an opportunity for everybody.
Let's go back to your artistic directors because that seems to be the starting point for the program, which you're in the process of giving birth to. Pardon me while I talk to you while you're in labor. Where's the training going to come from? Or are you assuming that the people who come into the program already know enough? Do you have an advisory board? Do you have people that would give advice that would help the person coming in and trying to create this 3-show season that you talked about?
And in terms of our expectation of their knowledge coming in is the same as the expectation of anybody who starts as an artistic director for the first time, having never done it before, that's the problem, right?
So you are looking for people that haven't done this before.
Correct. That's what we're looking for.
If Andre Bishop wanted to come into your program, you'd probably say, I think you're a little too advanced for that.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And I don't think we could afford, to be honest. Yeah, the idea with the fellowship, and what I will say is the fellowship is really is a secondary, at this stage, a secondary component. What we have to get going first is our new works development program, but the two will feed each other, we're hoping, in a very, very positive way. What we're looking for is exactly what you sort of alluded to, is someone who just wants to do that and has an inclination that they'd be good at it, and obviously has experience in the theatre industry of some type, but that doesn't have any formal experience in an artistic director role. And that is the goal for us, is to provide an advisory role for that person. So, for example, all of the people in the organization, including the general director, which at the moment is me, the board will be aware that this is a mentorship role. We're not throwing the artistic director under the bus on their own to be the primary leader of the organization. What we're trying to do is give them buoyancy as an artistic leader and give them guidance as what that looks like in terms of interacting with us. And so that they're more equipped, and that there's in a way more kindness and awareness so that they can make mistakes and be guided through that without the sort of pressure of a large expectation and salary and a full-time role. It's a fellowship. It's not a directorship in the same way as it is when you take a job on. If we can establish this, we believe that this fellowship can be a sort of accreditation for a person trying to make that transition later on. And that might be they complete the fellowship, and then 5 years later, an opportunity comes up at a large organization that they want to apply for. If the large organization believes we're good at what we do, which is providing that mentorship during that role, they'll look at that and they'll say, well, that's interesting. They've completed the fellowship at MMTL. And so we think that there are not many things that exist like this, particularly that are specifically focused on musical theatre. There are some organizations that have large organizations that have this type of program inside, but we're not, no one's giving these people as much responsibility as we will in terms of their ability to really make key decisions. Now, when I say that, we hope for them to submit to us a curated season, we're not going to be beholden to the pieces that they submit in their application if we give them the opportunity. But what we are going to do is know those works. And again, as we build out our web of contacts and our web of mentors and our web of producers in the industry, we're hoping that those connections are going to lead to opportunities for things that aren't just even the works that we actually take into our programs.
So you probably said this, and I just want to clarify it. Once this program starts getting started and you have somebody who comes in with 3 shows that they want to develop, are you developing them under the 29-hour read, the equity reading, or are you going to avoid equity altogether, or do you have thoughts about what agreement you would be using?
Yeah, we're going to operate. So our phase 1 agreement is in the showcase code. Yeah.
You're going to do
So
showcase.
yeah. So what we're
Okay.
doing is we're using the showcase code. Now for our phase 1, we use a very, we don't use anywhere near the full capacity of the showcase code. But it's still the best code for us to use.
So to go
Um,
back to the budget you mentioned, you said 40,000 per show is what you're estimating. So that would be $40,000 showcase,
mm,
which is I guess minimal in terms of what really happens with equity showcases, but still doable. It just means you're not going to build a beautiful set. And you're not going to necessarily design costumes. It'll be a much simpler presentation.
yeah. Well, our first presentation, our phase 1 presentation, what that looks like is that 6 weeks before the showcase occurs, we have a table read. Okay. So we bring together the team, we do a cold read, no more than one read through. What we want to do there is give the writers the opportunity to hear what they have before the showcase starts with some lead time so they can make some obvious changes if they need to before they actually get into the workshop. Okay. So that happens. That's what we call phase 1A. And then as we go into phase 1B, what we do then is we have 2 weeks, 10 days essentially with the teams. At the end of the 10 days, there's no expectation of anything really except a reading. So there's no staging. All of that time is spent and essentially on the script and on the music. There's no expectation that there's going to be a major presentation of the piece. It's still going to be music stands. It's still going to be, just everybody face front. That's the first part of what we're trying to do. We're taking away any big elements, certainly no set, things like that. When we go into phase 2, which is at least 12 months later, then we introduce some of those elements. But by that time, the budget goes up. I mean, now we're talking about 80 to 90,000, right? So depending upon the show. And so at that point, when we do start to introduce some set elements, it's more public presentation. We're hoping to have 5 performances that are public in a small theatre. That budget is well beyond the 40 I talked about. That's we realize once we get to that phase. And that's why we're at this point only planning to ever carry one of those through, because we just think financially it's going to be a huge list already. And so we want to keep that for now into a sort of contained, realistic model. Yeah. So basically we double the amount of money that we spend. So by the time a piece goes through its cycle with us, it will have had, about $110,000 spent in development by us. Not all pieces that go to phase 1 are going to go to phase 2, right? There's
It's a little bit more than we spend on development. I don't have ambitions as grand as yours. That's pretty impressive. I think there's. Owen, are there questions in the room?
Yeah, we have a couple of them.
Well, let's get some of those asked.
Sure, first one is from Allie McLean. I love the idea that the program is bespoke for the artist. A lot of the time, the other programs have a template that doesn't work for plays at a certain stage. With no submissions and using word of mouth, how do you find shows that are still in different stages of development that haven't had showcases that ADs would have seen?
I think we don't have any fixed expectation of what phase the show is at in its development. And so let me give you an example of what that means. Sam and Eliza, who are producing the debutantes for us, we did not know that the debutantes existed when we started conversation with them about us, about them being our first piece. What had happened is I had seen their work at prototype at Prospect and did some more digging into their other pieces that they had been produced. I'd seen the track record that Sam and Eliza had. And I sat down with them after consulting with the board and talking to them about the fact that this was the organization that might be interested. We had a couple of others too that we were batting around, some of which were at much more developed stages, one of which had had a very high level reading and it had been in development for a considerable amount of time. But in the end, we decided to go with Sam and Eliza. And when we sat down with them, the conversation was, if we were to give you this opportunity, what is the work that you would want to put your focus in? Because one of the questions is always, I think, that creators ask themselves in the modern environment is, can I get it made? And I wanted to see the piece that they thought they would never get made and just give over some trust into the artistic merit that they bring. And so essentially, the interesting thing about that conversation, and I'll never forget it, was as soon as I said it, they both looked at each other and they knew exactly what the piece was that they wanted to do. And it was a piece that they had been gestating and put a lot of their own time and effort into, and that they kind of didn't, I'm not sure they ever thought would be possible because of just the content. And so that's one example of how that selection process has happened. We don't really have any expectation of what that looks like. So it may be that someone goes to see a reading that's on our board, for example, or in one of our advisory circles, and they see the team and they like the team, but our board evaluates the piece and we don't really think the piece is the right thing. It might be just not what we're interested in, or is there something else that's different? And then we might choose to go with that piece. I'm really, it's sort of a hard question to answer because we just want to find good work and we don't really care how we find it.
There's a little bit of an obstacle course I think you're going to be facing because I think what Ali was also suggesting was the fact that depending on what level of production a show might be, it the options for doing a new production are often controlled by equity rules. Like, what you can and can't do may not be what you want to do may not be what you can do based on the equity rules because the show had a X production, a some level production. So it can't go back. I think once it's had a certain level of production, I don't think equity lets you go back. I'm not sure. None of us are sure about equity anymore right now. I think RK is also suggesting that there's a new 29-hour read. Um, RK, do you want to tell us what you were trying to get across in that post that you put in the chat?
Yeah, hello. Um, I'm a member of the Off-Broadway League, and there was a annual meeting that was this week. And one of the things that they were bringing up is that the Off-Broadway League version of a 29-hour, I believe it is the reading, has actually lapsed. But uh, it equity is easy enough to say, well, you can come in with a proposal and we'll look at agreeing to your reading guideline or contract. Um, you know, fairly easily. And the league itself did not think it was going to be such a big issue, but they did note that the actual guideline or contract had lapsed and that they're going to, work through it at some point. I don't know if you have heard of that and have had dealings with that already.
No, I mean we are in conversation with Equity, and so we've talked through all of our options, including the new developmental code, which is literally coming off the presses very shortly.
Oh,
Um,
are those the four tiers of
yeah,
development?
yeah.
So they're revamping that, are they?
Well, there's a new well, they're classifying as far as I'm aware, that it's a totally new code that they're bringing in, and it's really focused on developmental work. But for us, we've looked closely at the guidelines, and essentially everything we want to do in terms of production size and scope, because there's also a lot of limitations inside the guidelines in terms of how much you can spend on certain things, right? So we have to be careful about what that looks like because the budgets can't go beyond a certain amount. But what we are trying to do is operating within the guidelines that exist. So we don't really pushing up against that in any way. And I think also in terms of timeline, our non-profit status is helpful there because we're not a commercial producer. And so that gives the conditions are slightly more kind to non-profit organizations. But there is that timeline of, doing showcase to showcase. I think, Bob, is what you're talking about, that you can't do another showcase of a piece inside, I think it's 12 months if it's already happened. And so but that's the perfect timeline for us. We want that. We want that break because we want the writers to have the time after phase one to go away and do some work before they get back to the next phase. So, to be honest, we wouldn't want it happening any less than 12 months after if we do carry people through to phase two, because we think that, again, in all the conversations that we've had with writing teams, is time is the thing that's so hard for everybody to find. And so they need that time to really gestate what they've seen and to come back with something that's of value.
Okay, Owen, did we answer, Ali, first of all, did we answer your question?
Sort of. I
Yeah,
think
that's what I was
think
thinking.
what I was trying to figure out was, I believe, James, you spoke and said, that you believed in a longer development process where, you said the first week the AD and the writer and the director would get together and figure out what needs more work and what needs more development rather than just a set 1 week plan and then you showcase. But my question being, if there's a play that hasn't showcased yet because it needs more arrangements, or it hasn't showcased because lack of funds, because there's no a producer attached, or a play that's done really well in contests but hasn't been produced as a showcase or a reading, how are your artistic directors finding those projects? Are they looking at like finalists from, the ASCAP or good speed contests or stuff like that, or where are they searching for these projects? Because if they're not completely finished or they need more work, they're probably not showcasing.
Yeah, and I think, look, there's, first of all, the artistic director, in our model, the artistic director is in their application to work with us as a fellow. And this is longer term. So we're not even in this phase yet of what we're doing, right? We're nowhere near, we're a year away from even making the artistic director fellowship application process public, in terms of taking in applications for that. But what we're hoping from the artistic directors is that they will already know about work themselves because of the nature of the work they do in their own artistic lives, right? So they will bring to us as part of their application three works that they like. And where they found them or what stage they're at will be something that we'll obviously assess as a board and by that point in time, a separate selection committee. But the selection committee in the longer term is actually who's going to be choosing the three works that we take to phase one. So although the artistic director fellow will have some input on that going forward in the longer term, for now, the board, the selection committee, which is our board, currently is acting as the selection committee. They are determining what goes into these slots. And at this point, as I said, there are a lot of different pieces that are floated in to the conversation, and they come from a lot of different places. So there really is no, it's not, I mean, I'd never even seen a page of the script of the piece that we're developing this year. I just think the writing team is incredible, and I wanted to support them. That was the main goal, was supporting this particular team. And that's what we've been looking at is just the work that's happening, rather than what phase of a certain work at.
So James, what I'm understanding, and I don't think writers are adjusting their thoughts to this, is you're not actually going to take submissions from writers, because I've got questions in the chat that say, how do I submit? It's like, you don't submit. You basically align yourself with a producer who might be somebody who would submit for the fellowship that they're offering, but you're not really offering enough. Maybe later along the line, down the line, when you have this a little bit more fleshed out, maybe there will be opportunities for writers to submit work, and maybe you can have a pool of readings where and a pool of artistic directors, and start making matches like that. I mean, that would be later. That wouldn't be where you're starting, though.
Bob, what I would say to that is that we're not taking submissions of scripts, but we want to talk to writers. So if you're a writer and you want to have a conversation about your piece, email us. That's what I want to, like, we've had this happen already, and we've had several meetings over the last few weeks with writers. So if you are someone who has something at a phase that's very early development, obviously if you're already at the stage where you're getting the work produced at some level, then that particular piece is beyond our scope at this point, because we're coming in at the infancy of a piece, right? But that doesn't mean we don't want to meet you and talk to you, see the work that you're putting out there. So what we're actually trying to do, Bob, I think, as an organization, is build relationships in the writing community with writers, not just with producers that are interested in putting money behind it. That too, obviously, in the longer term. But we are very, very interested to have conversations with writers, because it's a win-win for us as we try to build this model as well, because we're trying to learn about what writers need. And that, because that is literally our only focus, is what do writers need to make their work happen more effectively, more quickly, and in the long term, we hope better. And so essentially, if you're on this call and you know a piece, or you have a piece, or what I want is to hear from you. So you can email us at info@manhattanmusicaltheatre.org. All the information is on our website at mmtl.org, but please do write us. We want to hear and we want to know the work that's happening. That's a big part of how we're positioning ourselves as an administrative organization, and that we just want to build a web of communication out into the writing community. And so that's why, for us, as you said earlier, Bob, like the sort of the cross-pollination with an organization like TRU is huge for us. We want to build these relationships because that's how we learn what's going on. And at some point we have to make selection decisions, but that's just part of the process for us.
Well, I lost my voice of God because Owen has left, but there are a couple things. First of all, I want to actually go to Sarah Truesdell. She's asking, I think you're talking about Ben, I don't know how you say his last name, Krywish, he's in Minneapolis, right? He's somebody that Rob Hoffman wants me to bring on my show. Yes, he's been talking to me about that. So can you tell it, do you know Ben Krywish in in the Minneapolis area?
Crywatts, Ben Crywatts.
Crivats? What?
Crywatts, I believe it's pronounced Ben Crywatts. Anyhow, yeah, are you familiar at all? Or Nautilus Music Theater?
No.
Okay. He's someone who is awesome. I suggest you connect with him. And also with your background in opera, they have an institute, the Wesley Balk Opera Institute, and that's for performers that at one point in time was kind of coming out of the larger institution, the Minnesota Opera. So
A great organization.
great person to really connect with. And Ben is awesome. He's very, very accomplished. He's been doing what he does for a very, very long time. And he is also a kind person and a good person. So I suggest connecting with him.
Great, thanks, Sarah.
If you get on my list and you come to spend Fridays with us, you'll be meeting Ben on Community Gathering in June at some point, because I know that Rob Hoffman is determined to have Ben come on. So the other question I hear, let's see, Don Paul. So you have showcases that cost $40,000 a pop. Okay, so let's talk about this for a second, Don. The showcase code, as it's existed up until apparently, today it's the 29-hour reading. I don't know what they're doing with the showcase code. Basically, the showcase code from Equity says that you can spend a maximum of $30,000 to produce your showcase, but that does not include the money for your venue, and it does not include the money you pay your actors. So consequently, you would easily go up to $40,000 for what you're talking about, James. But Equity does not let you spend more than $30,000 on the basic costs of producing your show.
Right.
So that's 30,000 in total.
30,000 plus what it costs for your venue and what you pay your actors. So the venue and the actors, the venue is going to cost you $10,000 probably, and the actors are going to cost you, I don't know what they're going to cost you heartaches, just heartaches and sadness.
So the 30,000 has nothing to do with the actual labor and or facility. I'm a procurement guy, so I use that kind of language.
You'd have to know what a budget is. A budget for a showcase basically includes your rehearsal space, your venue, which can be more than 30,000. What you pay your director, your music director, your choreographer, all of those salaries, what you spend on marketing, what you spend on public relations, PR. I can send you, if you send me an email, I'll send you a template of a showcase budget, so you can actually see what goes into a showcase budget.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll definitely send an email, and I just want to ask one last question then. So this is related to New York, because in the rest of the world, it don't cost that.
That's right.
Correct. Yes, yes, Donald, you're correct. It's New York. New York is hellish in this regard, but.
And the other ugly point you bring up is, do you capture it on video? That's such a long, complicated conversation. The essential answer to that is Equity makes it very difficult for you to capture anything on video. In 29-hour readings, it's almost impossible, although I've had people argue with me that they do it all the time. I don't know how.
Well, I can tell you, Bob, I literally have had a conversation with Equity about this 4 days ago.
Okay, good. Go for it.
And one of the reasons our current budget for the workshop to go, to that point is so high is that 9,000 of that, well, a little bit under 8,500 of it is the cost of recording that we have to pay our union members to make that happen. Now, the reason we're focusing on that and including that in our initial planning is because the asset that gives our writing teams is so huge that I think it's really worth going after that, even though it's such a high cost. So what we're really hoping to do is be able to get to that point where we can include that. Obviously, if that doesn't happen for us, and it may be a situation where the writing teams decide it's not something they're ready to have. There are circumstances where that might be the case. But, that is a huge, huge additional overhead of 8,500 at the moment. We're estimating on the basis of the numbers that Equity have given us.
Well,
What
let me
that
quickly
allows us-
quickly ask you something. Is that counted in the original 30,000, or is that the additional expenses that you're allowed to incur?
That's additional expenses we're allowed to incur, I'm
Okay.
assuming. Yeah, I'm assuming, because they didn't raise that to us. That's a good point. I should probably just confirm that with them. But yeah, so we think there's just huge value add to that, so we're going to try for that. But that, if we trim that out, then obviously we get down below into a lower number that takes us closer to 30. But again, it's all about production costs. The main limitation on that number is they don't want you building a full production under this code. That's what they're trying to limit. Is they don't want you building a full production. Well, we're not spending hardly anything on. In fact, we're spending nothing on production elements. So not until we get to phase 2 is that where we start to have to look at that number a bit more closely.
Can I just ask one more question? Is this like a reading, or it's a mini production, or your showcases?
The phase 1 showcase, this phase 1 showcase, Donald, is a reading in the traditional sense. If something goes into phase 2, then it becomes semi-staged. So at that point, we would probably choose which portion of the show we're going to present in a more staged, more realized version. It's an interesting question for this group, actually, because a lot of our feedback has been, as we've put together this model, that many, many producers are not interested in seeing anywhere near a full reading of the show. What they actually want is a concise 40-minute wrap of what presents the piece, a sense of what the piece will be. And so we're really building our planning around that idea. But I'd be interested if anyone on the call has any feedback and thoughts on that, including yourself, obviously, Bob.
Yeah, and just one more time, sorry to bug you. He said it's $9,000 to do the streaming, and they're gonna be photographing or videoing people sitting down in a staged reading. $9,000 to do a stage reading. They're not moving. There's no costumes. There's nothing.
No, because it's the actors' work, you see. So
But the actors aren't getting paid, right? That's separate from the actors' pay.
No, that money goes to the equity members. So that includes actors and the stage management. So that's the cost. Equity demands that you pay the actors an additional fee for this type of archival.
Well, let's pull the threads for a second. So I think we've put two things together. There's a part of your process in which people will actually be able to do readings, leading to a showcase. Or are you saying that are you going to do a reading on a showcase code? Because I actually have done that. I've actually gone into a festival, and I've actually applied for equity showcase code, and I've only done a glorified staged reading of my show. I did that because the most important thing to me was to have more than 29 hours for the people to rehearse, because I wasn't going to know anything about my show from a 29-hour reading for a show that I wrote for four male voices, piano, cello, and flute. I needed time to hear whether that was going to work. So we rehearsed, like, we probably didn't rehearse 150. I think it allowed 125 hours of rehearsal, 135 hours. We didn't rehearse that much, but it was more than 29. So understand the difference. If you sign on for a stage reading agreement, you are limited to 29 hours of rehearsal. There are so many limitations on what you can and can't do. There can't be set, there can't be costumes, there can't be production values, and there can't be any actual directed movement. They specifically talk about no exits and no entrances. So that's a reading. When you get to a showcase, which is definitely on James's menu, the showcase allows for all of that. If you can make a show happen for $40,000 and have a great set and great costumes and all that production value, more power to you. However, So the showcase does not limit you in terms of what you can do, other than the amount of money that you can spend. The reason for that, Don, if you can wrap your brain around this, is that given the likely amount that an actor is being paid to do a showcase, the production values and the production itself shouldn't be out of the range of what would be expected. If your actor's being paid $500, you can't. They don't want you to be spending $30,000 on a set. In other words, you're going into a whole different kind of contract when you get into those kinds of expenses. I mean, I'm really not saying it accurately, but basically, equity is trying to protect their actors, and basically they're saying, if you want this much production value and you want to do this much, then you should be paying our actors an off-Broadway weekly salary, or you should be doing a developmental reading on one of the tiered contracts. The tiered contracts that we're talking about, they can range from anywhere from 120,000, maybe more, to 500,000. I'm not sure what the top. It can be more. There's actually no limit in terms of what you can spend on one of your tiered developmental readings. Developmental. It's not really a reading. It's developmental presentations, workshops. This is where they resurrected the word workshop for this. So those are all specific equity agreements that you need to know if you want to actually make choices about what you want to do.
Gotcha. Yep.
Okay. And so I think the key thing too for us, so for example, a little bit to Bob's point, is that for our little read through, our table reading that we're going to do, 6 weeks before our main 2-week developmental process, we're using the 29-hour reading code for that. And we're only going to be doing it for 4 hours. But that's the code we have to use if we want to deal with equity. So we're going to use that 29-hour reading code, and then we progress up into a showcase 6 weeks later, and that showcase code again gives us a much, much wider scope than we're using at that point. We're not using anywhere near the full scope of a showcase code.
I think we have maybe one more question. Well, no, I think we answered Jeffrey Lau. Jeffrey says, so writers submit for phase 1 and AD candidates submit the recommendations as well separately. No, and you've actually answered this question by saying, we don't accept submissions, but we want to hear from you. So it's not like the door is closed, Jeffrey. It's just like, it's not open for scripts. It's open for you. Is there anything else in here? Is there anybody whose questions I haven't asked yet? Do a virtual hand raise or something. Okay, Sarah.
Very specific question about a very specific project. You're really wanting to bring something from infancy to full actualization, if I'm understanding correctly. Is that correct, James?
No. That's an interesting point. So what we're trying to do is bring something from infancy and develop it into the hands of a commercial producer, a non-profit entity that wants to carry it further forward. So we're trying to get the work to a point where it's presenting enough that somebody else will take it forward beyond us. That's what we're trying to do. So there is never a full production in our future for any of these shows. What we are trying to see is a full production produced by someone who's very good at doing that, which we don't do.
Okay, understood. Thank you for that clarification. The infancy part of it, I guess the question is like, how young does this infant need to be? If there was, a piece that it's a written piece, and turning that piece that is currently not a musical into a musical, maintaining like the content and the stories and the vignettes in it, but turning it into a musical. Is that, I guess, early on enough in the development process that something like that might be considered?
Yeah, I think the infancy refers to more where is it at its stage of progression in terms of exposure
Okay.
rather than the actual material. So you might come to us with a fully complete musical, but no one's ever seen it's never seen the light of day. It's never had a reading even. That would obviously be something we're interested in because it's not getting a shot. What we're really trying to do is give a writing team a shot with a piece. And so infancy is less about how many pages have been written and more about how much exposure has it had. If it's already had multiple readings and it's sort of got some interest from large scale organizations or producers, then it's not our thing. That's too big, it's too far past what we're trying to do.
And my follow-up question would be, could someone hypothetically apply for one of the artistic director positions, and of the 3 pieces that they submit, one of them is a script that is beginning to be turned into a musical? Could I, like for myself, could I
Your own piece,
apply
absolutely,
as
yeah,
an AD and
yeah, we
also
would,
as a
yeah,
one of the
absolutely. We
writers?
definitely wouldn't want to put any limitation on the work that's submitted in that part of the process, including it can be your own piece. The
Okay.
only restriction that we're currently looking at formalizing is that our board and selection committees are not directly creating work themselves, that they're promoting their own work. But I
Understood.
think in the context of what you're talking about, that's something we definitely consider.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for speaking to that and answering that question.
Have I missed anybody else in the room, guys? Anyone?
Yes, me.
Who's that?
It's me, Sue Horowitz.
Oh, Sue Horowitz. Okay, Sue.
I don't know how to raise a virtual hand. I raise my real hand. So I have a full script in songs. I have not had any public exposure. I understand you don't want to read the script that's my understanding. Would you like a brief synopsis? Is there an email? What is the best way to proceed at this point?
Yeah, I would say the best bet at this point is to email us at info@manhattanmusicaltheatre.
Okay, just a minute. Wait a minute. I'm not that quick. I have to write it down.
I
So
think
it's info
at manhattanmusicaltheatre.org.
And theater is an R-E, not E-R.
There's RE
all right, Manhattan Musical
Theatre, theatre.org.
Theatre.org.
Theatre.
And if you email us, Susan, we will, email the synopsis, and then we'll try and set up a time to have a chat.
That would be great. I will do that. And that will great. I'm going to have a reading come up. Would you like to attend? That'd be very nice.
Yeah, definitely. Let us know. Obviously, we're New York based at the moment, all of us.
New York based as well.
So
My show is Shakespeare in Manhattan.
I would send the information about the reading also, please.
I would definitely do that. I'll send you synopsis. That will save you time. If you want more stuff, I'll send more stuff. Okay.
Eric Jones, your turn.
Thank you so much. I just want to add on what Sue was mentioned too, because I actually will be in New York June 1st because we work with Theater Now New York. So we're actually doing a cabaret. So we're doing some songs from a piece that I actually am working on. So and I'm also working with some other with another writing team too. So would you be open to seeing a performance during that time?
Yeah, I would say it's exactly the same, Eric, and anybody, and going beyond today as well.
Can I just say, I just put the website into the chat. Everybody go to Manhattan Musical Theater Lab. Just go to his website and contact him through his website. That's what he's asking you to do.
Yeah.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I actually put it all for the New Works Initiative. I guess I didn't do just your work website. I'm actually driving them to the New Works Initiative page.
Hopefully they'll be able to navigate around. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to thank you at this point, and I'm going to actually go make dinner.
Good idea.
Excuse me. So again, thanks, James. I have to say, I so believe that the universe is in conversation with me all the time. Um, I just knew that I wanted to invite you to be on the show, and I had no idea that you are musical. You are the reincarnation of Musical Mondays. You're the reincarnation of two of my dear friends,
Your friends,
Frank and Vic. So
Okay.
I'm astonished by this. I should have known. Of course, the universe did this. So and then also your pals with Gwen Arment, who's an old friend. But I'm going to remove spotlight from you, and I'm going to say a few words to my YouTube audience. But I am thanking James for being with us today, and it's great learning about your company. And I'm hoping that we can cross-pollinate a little, as you mentioned, and that some of my members will become interested in what you're doing and become part of your community as well.
Wonderful.
So I want to thank everybody who, speaking of community, I want to thank all of you who come and join me every Friday at 5 or 5:30. Um, kind of amazes me every week, but there you are. In the weeks to come, I've got some interesting people coming on. By the way, if you just sort of discovered us on YouTube or on one of the podcast stations, and you are interested in theater and you're interested in these conversations, you can be part of the room. You can come in, you can actually ask questions and be part of the community. We'd love to have you. I think I would love to have you. I haven't met you yet, but I think I'd love to have you. So just email me at trunltd@aol.com. That's trunltd@aol.com. And we'll invite you every week. Next week, I've got Barbara Pasternak coming from TheaterWorks USA. Most people know TheaterWorks USA is one of the go-to places for the development of theater for young audiences. And they've been doing this forever, and they're the leader in theater for new audiences. Well, whoever is talking would stop doing that, please. Okay. So the other thing, in 2 weeks, I have a very profoundly important community gathering that I'm doing, and I'm hoping that everyone will come. If you're not aware of it, I'm sure you are aware of it, but in case you're not, the administration has defunded the NEA, and it's made it what's happening, like it's been a bloodbath. Every theater company that I know is being told that their funding has been cut because it doesn't fit into the president's priorities. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the NEA and the cuts to the NEA, and we're going to talk about the president's priorities and try to figure out what that means. And I have New York Theater coming. I have Farm Arts Collective coming, and I've got the Drama League coming, as well as someone from America for the Arts. So it's a conversation that is essential. If you're in theater, you must join us for this. Please join us for this. And then after that, I've got a little bit more lighthearted interview with Bob Cuccioli, who some of you know is the Tony nominee from Jekyll and Hyde, and one of our favorite musical comedy actors, and also one of our favorite Shakespearean actors, as it turns out, as well. So lots going on in the weeks to come. So be part of it, join us, and you can come for free. We are a community service, and we let you come for free. However, we do have bills. So if you pay a $10 entrance fee, that will help us. If you join us a member, that will help us. Or if you want to make a donation just because you like what we're doing, then go to TRU Donate, TRUDonate.com, TRUDonate.com. Give us what you can afford. We'd appreciate it. Got lots of expenses now. We're out of shutdown. Things are live. It costs money. So that's it. Thanks for being with us, and I hope to see you in weeks to come. That's it. See you next week, I hope.